Hello, everyone. Well, it is a freezing day here in New York City. Even my dog didn't want to go for a walk, so I thought maybe it's time to sit down and revisit all of my friends on YouTube. Do I have a topic for today? Oh, yes, I do. This is something I've been asked about quite a lot to go into, and I've been thinking about how best to address the topic of perspective. I've been teaching for 1,000 years. I teach perspective, but what I want to do here for you is to try to break it down, go over the basics and the most important aspects of it, or what I think they are. And I want to say, though, I don't think you need to have a 5-year degree in engineering or architecture. I know you don't have to become good at sketching or at least understanding perspective. More importantly, I think understanding the basics of perspective and being able to handle them in your drawings or your paintings is important, not as a way to make your drawings or paintings more technical or even more accurate necessarily, but to give you tools, to give you as the artist more things to work with, to make your drawings not more technical, tight, and accurate, but to make them more authentic, more you, more expressive. Perspective drawing is just a tool. It works for you. You don't work for it. It works for you. It's a thing you can use to make your drawings better, but in your way of thinking. Not better objectively necessarily, but better personally. So what is perspective anyway? I think, first of all, I want to demystify it. Perspective is literally just a common sense way we all understand of how we look at the world around us. If you walk down the street or out in a field, wherever you are, your eyes, your brain understands that one thing is in front of another thing, that something seems far away, something seems closer. And yeah, of course, because they are. It's common sense, it's reality, and it's how we understand spatial differences in the world. So there's nothing mysterious or technical about it. It's just how we observe the world. How we translate that to our paintings or drawings is where it gets interesting, at least, where I want to concentrate my efforts today. I think the thing to remember is perspective in drawing or painting is just an illusion. It's a magic trick we play on ourselves and on our viewers to make something we draw or paint look as if it's in front of something else, to make some things we draw and paint look closer and others look far away. Literally, that's all it is. You might say to yourself, well, duh, yeah, of course that's what it is. Yes, but I think it's important to say that, to recognize that, because I think understanding that it's an illusion, that it isn't real. In drawing or painting, all we have to work with are 2 dimensions. We have height and we have width on any piece of paper or canvas that we happen to be working on. So the illusion of perspective makes it look as if something is in 3 dimensions. So I love it. I love the fact that it's just an illusion and a magic trick, really. Of course, on a flat piece of paper, there are not 3 dimensions. So anything we can do to imply that sense of depth, dimensionality, perspective, if you will, is worth thinking about. Again, it doesn't mean you have to know these arcane, difficult rules as a way to make your drawings more difficult, more complex. It just means it's a tool waiting there for you to use to make your drawings more interesting, more compelling, more narrative rich, if that's what you want, and hopefully just a lot more fun and easy to do. Okay, so what am I sketching here today? I'm going to do a couple of sketches for you. This first one is a little exercise I make my classes often do. I think one of the easiest ways to understand the illusion of perspective on a two-dimensional flat surface is to first comprehend the importance of, the existence of, and the importance of the horizon line. It's one of those things I think we all think we know, but when we sit down to try to draw something in perspective, it either gets lost, or sometimes we get confused, or we find it difficult to find, to locate, or even to understand. We shouldn't. It's very simple. The horizon line is, another word for the horizon line, I think is a better way to put it, is your eyesight, your eye line, your line of view. So what I'm sketching here is what I hope will make it easier to understand for anybody who's even struggling to figure out what the horizon is or where it is, how do you find it, and how does that impact your drawing or your painting. Imagine yourself on this beautiful beach. That line at which, if you stand on the sand and look out over the water, that line at which the sky meets the water is the horizon line. Again, most of you are probably saying, well, yeah, of course. Well, yes, of course, but I've seen so many people, very skilled people, sketching a city scene, a still life, a landscape, a portrait, etc., who tend to forget this very simple truth, the horizon line, how to locate it, how it informs the rest of your majestic work of art. So, by the way, I should say parenthetically that on the horizon and these lines of linear perspective that I'm going to be going into don't just affect when you're drawing a building, architecture, cityscape, that sort of thing. This comes into play if you're drawing a portrait, a landscape. If you're drawing clouds, water, everything has perspective. Everything you want to paint or draw. Abstract shapes have perspective. By that I mean they have tops, bottoms, left and right sides. They all have this illusion of dimension to them that can be addressed by understanding the basics of perspective. So the first line I always draw in any sketch, in any drawing, if any of you have watched me draw or paint, it's rare that the first line I draw would not be the horizon line. Why? Because it's not the line at which everything disappears or everything sits on. Buildings, people, clouds, etc. don't all sit on the horizon. They can, but the horizon line bisects your point of view, your visual field. So again, if we go back to that imaginary beach that we're all standing on, which I wish I were today. Oh, it's cold here. And if you look straight out, you can understand that you'll see visual information above the horizon line, the sky in this case. You'll see visual information below the horizon line, the water in this case. This little diagram, I think, can be very helpful to those of us who just struggle to understand what is the horizon. It is the horizontal line, aptly named, where all visual information seems to recede. So I've sketched in here 3 boats sailing away from us. And another way to understand perspective is by thinking of these 3 guys. Things of equal dimension, I'm going to say something else very obvious that we all know, but it's worth repeating. Things of equal dimension will look smaller the farther away they are from us. And again, I can hear you all saying, well, yeah, of course. But yeah, that's what perspective is in drawing and painting. It's making those things that are close to us appear closer, and the things that are farther away from us appear farther away. When we get into the specifics of painting, there are other ways, even more expressive ways really, to imply dimension and perspective in our work. For one thing, in painting, we can modify the edges. Things with softer edges tend to look farther away. Things with less saturated color tend to look far away. Things with more detail, harder edges, more contrast tend to look a little closer to us. Obviously, again, common sense. Because if something is closer to us, we can see it more clearly. We can make out the colors and the details. And as things get further and further away, they tend to lose detail. The color looks desaturated. The values look less stark. But today I'm just going to be talking primarily about linear perspective. That's a kind of a spatial perspective we can play with in painting. But a linear understanding of perspective is all predicated on our understanding of vanishing points, horizon lines, etc., which I'm going to be getting into. So if we have three boats, they are of equal size in reality, but the one furthest away from us looks less clear, it looks smaller. The one nearer to us looks larger, looks more clear, looks more obvious. The details look crisper, cleaner, and more obvious. But in terms of linear perspective, that's what we're dealing with. The object closer to us just simply appears bigger. The objects far away look smaller. But they all don't sit on the horizon. They are bisected by the horizon. So there's visual information of this boat above the horizon, visual information below. Okay, that's really an overview of what perspective is. If we complicate the situation just a little and move into the real world, here's a photograph I took. This is in Rome, though it doesn't matter where it is. But, and I did an overlay of this network of lines. This is a beautiful church in Rome near the Piazza Navona, San Luigi de Francesca, for those of you who wonder. But you can see in this photo, I'm standing on the pavement. The horizon line bisects my visual information so that there's visual information above, visual information below the horizon line. So the horizon line isn't where a building stops. It cuts the visual field that we see wherever we're sitting or standing. It bisects it. So there's information below, information above. Just like in our imaginary beach scene. But a couple things I want to point out about this. This is marked up photograph. One thing you'll notice, this is a busy city scene in busy Rome. All these people walking through. Look at this. All of their heads pretty much fall along the horizon line. I hope you can see that. I sketched over this, so they're a little obscured. But these two guys here, they're in the midground. Their heads are on the horizon, so they appear more or less like the center boat. This group of figures standing here are closer to us, the viewer, but their eyes are on the same horizon line as these two guys are who are farther away. These people appear closer, and therefore we understand them to be closer to us. Their feet touch the ground, lower in the image than these do, but their eye lines, their heads, are all on the same horizon. Similarly, this group of people in the background, their feet touch the ground quicker, but their heads, their eye lines are all on the same horizon. Why would that be, you might say? Because the horizon line is just the line of sight. So if I were standing here on the beach, my eyes would be on that horizon line. You're in charge of where you put that horizon line as the artist. If you're drawing this drawing or painting this painting, you decide where that horizon line is, but that's your eye line. So you can lower it, and you can imply that a person is sitting on the beach. Maybe their eyes are lower, or even lying down. You could make a horizon line very low, just a couple of inches off the ground. Or you can raise it up as if a person is standing on a lifeguard station, a platform. But the point is, the horizon line isn't something difficult to find. You create it as the artist, as the originator of this drawing. So, yeah, if somebody were walking down the beach away from me, starting to maybe go into the water, their feet would appear to touch the sand or the water quicker than mine because they're farther away from me, but their eyes would be still on the horizon line. Are there exceptions to that? How do you know how high the horizon line is? That just depends on how tall you are. Most people, within reason, are within, roughly 5.5 feet to 6 to 6.5 feet. So their eye line is going to be quite similar, even though there'll be minor variations. Hopefully you can see in this photograph, this guy's head's a little above the horizon because he's taller. His friend here, his head's a little lower than the horizon line because he's a bit shorter. But within reason, they're all situated on that horizon. What would the exceptions to that be? Well, if this person were walking with a child, the kid's eyes would not be on the horizon. They could be if the kid was doing the drawing or your head was at the same level as that child, then yes, the horizon line would be down there. But if the horizon line is roughly 5.5 to 6 feet or so up off of the ground plane, that would be the horizon there. Over here, if there were a set of stairs for some reason, or a mound in the sand and someone were standing higher, then yes, their eyes would be up off the horizon line too. This rule of thumb, if you like, really only happens assuming everybody's standing more or less on the same plane. All of these people are standing on the street and the piazza, which is more or less flat. So within, again, minor variations, everyone's head is going to be on or very near the horizon line. It just helps enormously to locate the horizon line first in any drawing or any sketch, because everything is going to radiate off of that horizon line. Everything will be regulated by where that horizon line is. Now, why would that be? Because the horizon line, if you believe the earth is round, and many of us still do, the horizon line is just indicates the limits that humans can see. Human eyesight is only good for so far, but there comes a point where the limitation forms the horizon. It can be theoretically infinitely far away, but it's as far away as the eye can see. So if we extend these boats into the distance, assuming they're all more or less in a line, their visual information will at some point, if they continue to sail away from us, become so small and so minor that they will fade from view, they will vanish from our capacity to see them, and that will happen on the horizon line. The point at which this boat gets so far away that we can no longer see it will be called the vanishing point. It's the apparent point at which visual information recedes far enough away to become invisible. That happens on the horizon line pretty much without exception. If we want to just confine our comments today, which I do, to linear perspective, that means the construction of horizon lines, vanishing points, etc. There are three major types of perspective that I think are important to understand. In brief, that's a 1-point perspective, a 2-point, and a 3-point. This is a photograph. Well, I took a series of photographs of, here in New York, this is the Museum of Natural History. I took a series of photographs from different points of view to point out this effect. So this is an example of a 1-point perspective. That means you're looking at something, and it doesn't have to be an object. It can be a space, such as a room. It can be a landscape. It could be a human figure or an animal or a tree, anything at all, even negative space. If you're looking directly at something, it's just easier to discuss and explain if you're looking at something architectural, because they tend to have a lot of built straight lines that we can discuss. But these effects hold true no matter what it is you're drawing. But anyway, back to the museum. It's a beautiful neoclassical building on Central Park West. So I stood here looking across the street from Central Park West, looking directly at the front door of the building. And then I found the horizon line. It's a little tricky to see. It was a very cold day, so there weren't that many people. But if you look, here's a group of standing people. The horizon line is just there, absolutely straight, passing through their eyesight. So roughly 5+ feet up off the ground. If I were standing here, my eyesight would be just there. So because I'm doing this drawing and I took the photo, I'm the one that established where the horizon line is. So what's interesting about a 1-point perspective is that you're looking directly at something, axially, if you will. So all these lines, the lines of the cornices up above, the windows here, the steps on the sidewalk, the curb along the street, all the lines that run perpendicular to the direction you are looking, all appear to be more or less parallel, one to the other. And they are. So, but if you're looking axially, the bits of the building and the environment, the cars and the street that run perpendicular to this face, they all appear to recede. Maybe easier to understand it here in the crosswalk. If you draw a line along the edge of those white stripes until it intersects the horizon, that's going to be pretty close to your single vanishing point. In a 1-point perspective, that means there's one single vanishing point. Then you can begin to radiate out from that point. Laying over a photograph, I really do recommend it. If you struggle to understand these things, it just helps enormously. a couple of exercises like this, and I almost guarantee you sketching in perspective will start to become much easier. But you can see that all the information that radiates out from this vanishing point all disappears right at that point, which again is on the horizon, right along, equal to your eye line. Why would you choose to use a 1 point? Is it ever the only option? No. It is an option, though, in a drawing or a painting if you want to emphasize something as being maybe a little more formal. You reduce a lot of the movement and the energy in a painting if you can only see one plane of it. You're looking directly at this building. So it reduces energy slipping off the page this way or that. It makes it a very staid, solid, still looking kind of a scene. So you might choose a 1 point perspective if you're doing a drawing or painting, if you want to minimize the amount of jittery energy, or you want to show something in a slightly more formal or purposefully static way. I love 1 point perspectives. They're the easiest to draw and the easiest to understand. They're not the only option, but they are definitely easy to understand. One thing to point out, you'll note that all the visual information above the horizon line looks as if it's sloping down to meet the horizon. And it is, visually it is. And all the information below the horizon, the visual information below the horizon, looks as if it's sloping up to meet the horizon, and it is. Or the visual illusion is that it is. And all of it vanishes at the same point. So all the visual information in this whole image radiates out from and recedes to, would appear to vanish at one single point. So in this little scrappy sketch, you can also apply this if you're drawing a space. I mean, literally, as I said earlier, it could be a landscape with trees and etc. It doesn't have to be an architectural space. But I'll keep it kind of the built environment sort of situation because it's just easier to understand. But a space, so say this is a room of some sort. It's not real, I'm just making it up as I go. But just like the beautiful neoclassic facade of this building, if you look at a wall and a space that's right in front of you, you're standing at the end of a room looking directly at the wall. The top of the wall, the bottom where it meets the floor, the top where it meets the ceiling, the top of the windows, the bottom of the windows, all these lines appear parallel, and they are. And the center of your eye line, if you're standing directly in the middle, the end of the room, looking down the way at this, the vanishing point would be right in the center. So the lines at the ceiling would connect at the floor. The lines of the ceiling would connect at the top of the wall. The lines of the floor would connect at the bottom of the wall, of course. And perhaps there are windows and doors on this wall on the side. They will look more oblique because you're seeing these at an acute angle. So again, this is not real, it's just, I'm making it up for demonstration purposes. looks like some elementary school room where I went to school now that I look at it. Which gives you a clue what I did in school. I used to just sit and practice drawing in perspective. I've been obsessed and fixated on perspective since I was a very young kid. For some reason, I've just always found it fascinating. So no, I didn't go to architecture school to learn how to draw this. I learned this on my own. And that's the other big lesson. You don't need lots of training or schooling or impressive degrees to be able to draw in perspective. Literally anybody can do it. So this is a very simple sketch, but I hope it proves somewhat useful, because those tenets that I pointed out here on an exterior object shape hold here for, in this case, an interior spatial shape. You can see the walls and the floors. Everything below the horizon line appears to slope up to meet the horizon. Everything above the horizon line appears to slope down to meet the horizon. It does. Everything radiates out from this single vanishing point on the horizon. And it's really very simple. So if you wanted to sketch an interior view, even one much more complicated than this, it really isn't that hard if the first thing you do is just locate the horizon, and then everything else radiates out like a sunburst from that single point directly in the center. Do you have to put the vanishing point directly in the center? It is in the center of your eye line, yes. But as far as composing a painting or a drawing, no. But what you would shift is not your eyesight. You might want to shift the frame in a painting or a drawing so you see a little bit more of this side and a little bit less of that. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. But what I mean is, this doesn't have to fall directly in the mathematical center of your drawing. If it looks awkward or too stilted, you can shift it left or right. It'll still work. All I can say is if you open up one side too much, distortion starts to become an enemy. So in very simple terms, that's a one-point perspective. A more typical way we tend to see our environment, though, is if you walk up to a thing, a car, a tree, a person, a building, you're gonna see it in a two-point perspective. And by that, what that means is you're gonna see a little bit of one side and a little bit of the other of the same object. So this is the same building, the Museum of Natural History here in New York. And this is a photo I have of it, but from an angle. So walking up, again, I'm on Central Park West looking across at the facade of the building. So the horizon line will be the same. It's a bit small, but if you see people here on the sidewalk, they're on the same plane I am. I'm standing here. So that is where the horizon line is going to be. Some of you will say, but wait, what are these people up here? Yeah, and that's a bit my fault because there is a stairway here, an exterior stairway, which you can't quite see, but it slopes up from this sidewalk. So these folks up here are 1/2 level up from where these people are standing and from where I am standing. So that is why why their eyes are not on the same horizon, because they're not standing on the same plane. If you see these two people, they're on the same sidewalk as I am, or the same level as I am, sidewalk across the street. So their eyes are on the horizon. These people are up about 6 or 8 steps, so they are not. And then these people in the distance, further up the grand staircase into the entry, become progressively higher up off of the horizon line. So anyway, the most obvious difference is we see a little bit of the same front facade, but we see a little bit of the return of this wall and a little bit of the side walls in this case too, which you can hint at here and here. But here, again, this is a more, I guess, common way we tend to see things. We generally approach them from one angle or another, so we might see a little bit more of this part of the facade than we would of that. So the visual elements, this line I want to point out. This is the corner of the building that's nearest to us, so the nearest edge. So from this point to the left and this point to the right, things look different. Everything to the left of the nearest point, which is going to look taller, because just like the boat that's closest to us appeared taller, the corner of the building that's closest to us is going to appear to be the tallest. So everything to the left of this tallest corner, in this case, will look like it recedes into space this way. And everything to the right will look as if it recedes into space this way. So if you want to find the perspective points in any view, and you have the time, take a quick photo, print it out, or you could just look at it and sort of figure it out. But if you really want to study it, print it out, draw a spider web of lines over it like I did, and all of this stuff will become completely obvious and clear to you. The horizon line bisects your visual information where your eyesight is. So it's a tall monumental building. So there's visual information below the horizon, yes. In this case, sidewalk, steps, street, cars, mostly. And there's visual information above the horizon. In this case, more steps and much of the building is up above. Yeah, so those are the important things to know about a two-point perspective. A more graceful or comfortable two-point perspective usually favors one side over the other rather than splitting the building directly in half. But that's an issue of composition and balance, which I don't really think we need to get into here, but just so you know. I also did this diagram a little while ago. Same things exactly, except this is a very simple hypothetical building that I sketched up. Each corner of this little house is equal in height. So if this is roughly 5.5 feet, this house would probably be 12 feet to the edge of the roof. So this corner of the building would be 12 feet, this would be 12, this would be 12. This corner appears taller because it's closer to us. This corner appears smaller because it's farther away, just like our friendly little boats. So that corner would be this boat, this corner would be that, and this one essentially that, because it splits the difference. But from the nearest edge, which is the closest corner to you, everything to the right of that will slope away to vanish along the horizon at the vanishing point on the left, and everything to the right side of that will slope away to the vanishing point on the right. Again, things below the things below the horizon, below your eyesight, appear to slope up to meet the horizon. Things above the horizon appear to slope down to meet the horizon. How do you find the vanishing points? There is a way to do it absolutely, but it's not a fixed answer. It's a function of how close you are to the object or far away. If you're just sketching, it's overly simplistic to say, if it looks good. That is true, though. Once you just sort of know that these vanishing points happen on the horizon and you've located the eye line or the horizon line, and if you're sketching from real life, you can tell if the drawing looks distorted or funny or not. But that's not a great answer, but it's true. One thing I can say is if you really get into the science of perspective construction, you will learn that, yeah, there's a way to determine exactly the distance apart. I think for most purposes, for sketching, it just doesn't matter that much. If it looks comfortable, if it looks good, you'll know. But as a bit of rule of thumb, the angle which determines how far apart these vanishing points occur is, roughly speaking, a 65-degree angle. If you're looking at something, the human eyes can see roughly 65 degrees, I believe it is, including center, left, and right. Because beyond that point, things start to distort and look really uncomfortable or way too splayed out. So I don't know if that helps, but it is true. A couple things I want to point out, though, that are helpful to me. If you want to find the center of this face of this hypothetical building, would you take a ruler and just measure that and then find the mathematical center? You could, but you'd be wrong, because you want to find the center of this wall in perspective. So if you understand what I've been talking about so far, you would know that the apparent half of the wall that's closer to you is going to look larger than the apparent half a wall that's farther away from you, because things in perspective tend to look closer together and smaller the farther away they get from you. Here's a little hack, though. If you sketch out a shape and you want to find the perspective or the apparent center, just do a little X through that shape, top to bottom, bottom to top. Where that crosses, that's going to be pretty darn close to the apparent perspective center of that shape. So then from there, if this is a building you're drawing and it's fairly formal, you can begin to add other information, just because you can wing it from that point and guess. If you really wanted to, you could split this half in half again to find the 25% marks. But generally, if I'm sketching, and as long as I've been doing this, I still do this, I'll just lightly draw an X through a big shape. That's the apparent center, and it just helps me place all the visual elements that will happen along this facade. Especially useful if you are drawing buildings, architecture, if you have to place a lot of windows or that sort of thing. I did that on the Museum of Natural History. I did that here on this facade to the left, which I favored in this view. If you just take any portion of that wall in perspective, draw an X through it, That'll help you find the center, the apparent center. Again, this half is slightly smaller than this half because this half is farther away, this half is closer. And that helps you place, in this case, this really Beaux-Arts neoclassical building. Lots of it is based on symmetry, so you'd be able to locate this large arched doorway, the pillars, smaller windows left and right, if you just find where the center is. So from here, if you have this much information that's more or less accurate, if the roof breaks, if it's a pitched roof and it breaks more or less in the center, you just bring this line up. The crest of the roof is going to vanish on the horizon too because it's on the right side of this nearest edge line. That's the corner of the building that's closer to you. So everything to that side will vanish to that perspective point. Everything to this side would vanish to that. So if you have just this much of a diagram, you can really start to flesh out your drawing by placing sidewalks. Perhaps there are fences if it's maybe it's a farm, maybe there's another building out here. Everything just becomes really, really easier to sketch once you have that horizon line placed and even a fairly decent idea of where the perspective points are. Will this outbuilding, if this is a barn or a garage or something, will all the lines of this second building conform to the same perspective lines as this? If it is built square to that building, then yes. If it's turned, then no. But what will stay the same is the horizon line. That's not going to change. If, however, there's a hill, say to the right of this building, that goes up, and there's a little, let's say an outbuilding at the top of that hill, will the horizon line bisect that? It can't because this is up on a hill. But what will stay the same here is if it's more or less built square to this house, the vanishing points will remain the same. Why? Because you're standing at a fixed point looking at this, and that gives consistency and solidity to everything you're drawing. Well, that's really the basics, but hopefully you're finding this helpful. There's one other type of perspective I think is worth discussing, and then I'll let you go. But I have talked so far about all visual information disappearing, always on the horizon, always at one or two vanishing points on the horizon. What that means is that the visual parts of the environment you're looking at, in this case the doorway, these pillars, windows, the building itself, all these lines appear to be parallel and perfectly vertical. Sometimes you may not want to do that. You may want to exaggerate the height of a building or build in some additional drama to your drawing or painting. Again, it's just a tool. It's a tool you can use. So what I'm hinting at here is not a 1 point, not a 2 point, but a 3 point perspective. Yes, somewhere I had worked up a diagram of this. Here we go. So if you are looking at, it could be an object, it could also be a space, it could be very tall trees, any kind of drawing or painting where you want to emphasize the height of something, and mostly the drama of it, you can start to play around with the sense of three-point perspective. And what that means is the horizon line remains the same. You're standing in the same place, probably. Well, you are. The vanishing points 1 and 2 remain the same, but what you've added is this illusion that things, as they crawl up into space, get taller and taller and taller away from you. The tops of them appear to converge. They appear to be smaller. And if you extend these lines out, they will merge and vanish at a third perspective point somewhere up in space. Is it possible to physically locate that? Yes, but generally not worth the effort. And it also depends on how extreme you want to make this effect, how angular you want to draw things. It's just, for me, enough to know it happens. I hope that's helpful. A three-point perspective, it's not that rare to use it. If you are a fan of drawings and paintings and comic books especially, those artists use exaggerated and dramatic perspectives, 3 points all the time. It gives the illusion of power and majesty if you're looking up at something and it looms over you. Conversely, I just printed this off Google Maps. It's the same building, Museum of Natural History. But conversely, if you're way up in the sky looking down at something, you'll notice that the once vertical lines appear to converge. They would do the same thing as this, but in reverse. They would vanish very far down below you in the center of the earth somewhere. So when might it be useful to use a three-point perspective? It's always an option. It's never a rule that you have to, of course. But one place it always sort of comes to mind is, if you've ever been to a forest, like the great redwoods, something like that, these massive tall trees, and you imagine yourself sitting or lying on the forest floor, looking up at this canopy of leaves. These tree trunks may be actually vertical and parallel to one another if you're up close down on the ground. But if you look up in the sky, they may be equidistant, more or less apart on the ground. They're the same distance apart, more or less, up in the sky, but they appear closer because they're farther away from you. So a three-point perspective in this case is just a way to imply, to suggest the illusion of great distance. So I recommend getting at least familiar with the simpler perspectives, 1 and 2 point, before you start playing around with this. But it's not that hard, and it's there waiting for you if you want to do it. This type of perspective also starts to sort of imply that you'd want to start to play around with other forms of implication of distance and great space. And by that I mean things far away from you tend to look less distinct. Things closer to you tend to look more distinct. Colors far away from you tend to get bleached out or look to be bleached out. Colors closer to you tend to be more vibrant, more saturated. And that's another way you can imply depth and perspective in a painting or a drawing, but I didn't want to go too far down that road yet. I wanted to keep today more about discussing of linear perspective. But when you combine in a painting or drawing an understanding of linear perspective with an understanding of more expressionistic, emotional, spatial perspective, and an understanding of the desaturation of colors and values and edges, etc. When you build up any level of understanding of all these different ways of implying three-dimensionality and distance on a flat two-dimensional plane, you are the master of your universe. Nothing you couldn't draw or paint. And I mean that. There's nothing you can't. So again, painting in perspective is not an eat your spinach kind of thing that you have to learn. It's there waiting for you. It's a tool that's there to help you make more interesting, more expressive, more personal paintings. So hoping this little walk through perspective has been useful or helpful for you. And I'm sure I'll be back with maybe a more in-depth study of the other ways of creating the illusion of three-dimensionality, depth, and distance in our work. But happy painting, everyone, and thanks so much for watching.